Commander Zethka of the Valonian Defense Fleet stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with growing despair. Red dots representing enemy vessels outnumbered his blue fleet markers by nearly 4-1. The Krillian Empire had come in force, their black ships bristling with plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes that could tear through Valonian shields like paper. "Sir, the outer defense grid has fallen," reported his tactical officer, her voice trembling despite her military training. "The Krillians have broken through the asteroid fields. Estimated time to Valonia Prime, 6 standard hours." Zethka's forearmed form tensed as he processed the information. His species had evolved from tree-dwelling creatures on a peaceful world, developing advanced technology through cooperation and shared knowledge. They had never been warriors. Even their military vessels were originally designed for exploration and defense against natural disasters, not the brutal realities of interstellar warfare. "Send word to all colonies," he commanded, his voice heavy with the weight of inevitable defeat. "Begin immediate evacuation procedures. Priority to the nursery worlds and research stations." The Krillians were different. They had conquered dozens of star systems, enslaving peaceful species and stripping worlds of resources. Their soldiers were bred for combat, genetically enhanced killing machines that felt no mercy, no compassion. Stories spoke of entire civilizations wiped out simply for the crime of existing in systems the Krillians wanted. As another wave of red indicators appeared on the display, Zethka knew his small fleet could not hold them. The Valonians had perhaps 24 ships, mostly converted research vessels with hastily mounted weapons. Against the Krillian war machine, they were insects facing a storm. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," his communications officer announced. "It's from the Terran ship that arrived yesterday." Zethka had almost forgotten about the strange vessel that had emerged from jump space in the outer system. The Terrans were a recently contacted species, having only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last few decades. Their ship was small, unremarkable, and carried only a diplomatic team according to their initial message. "Put them through," Zethka ordered, though he couldn't imagine what these newcomers could possibly offer in the face of annihilation. The main screen flickered, revealing a bipedal creature with pale skin and short brown hair. Unlike the Valonians' peaceful demeanor or the Krillians' intimidating presence, there was something unsettling about the human's calm expression. His eyes held a coldness that seemed out of place for a diplomat. "Commander Zethka," the human said, his voice carrying an odd accent through the translation matrix. "I'm Colonel Marcus Chun of the Terran Colonial Defense Force. We've been monitoring your situation." "Colonel Chun," Zethka replied, fighting to keep despair from his voice. "I appreciate your concern, but I fear there is little anyone can do. The Krillian fleet will reach our homeworld within hours. Our evacuation ships cannot possibly save everyone." The human's expression remained unchanged. "We're prepared to offer assistance." Zethka stared at the screen in confusion. "Assistance? Colonel, with respect, your ship appears to be unarmed and carries only a small crew. The Krillians have over 200 warships. Appearances can be deceiving, Commander." Shin glanced at something off-screen. "We've been tracking Krillian movements for several months. They've been expanding toward Terran space, enslaving species in their path. We consider this a matter of mutual interest." Before Zethka could respond, his tactical officer called out urgently. "Sir, massive energy signatures detected. Something is emerging from jump space." The display exploded with new contacts. Dozens of ships, then hundreds, materialized in perfect formation around the Terran diplomatic vessel. These were not the sleek, curved designs favored by most peaceful species. The Terran ships were angular, brutal-looking things covered in weapon emplacements and armor plating. They moved with predatory precision, spreading out to envelope the approaching Krillian fleet. "How is this possible?" Zethka whispered. "Our long-range sensors showed no massed fleet movements in this sector." Chen's smile was cold and sharp. "Stealth technology. We've been here for 3 days, waiting. The Krillians aren't the only ones who can plan an ambush. The Krillian fleet, which had been advancing in standard battle formation, suddenly found themselves surrounded. Their formations wavered as commanders tried to adapt to the unexpected threat. The lead Krillian dreadnought, a massive vessel bristling with enough firepower to level a city, transmitted on open channels. Unknown vessels, you interfere with Krillian Imperial operations. Withdraw immediately or face annihilation. Chin's response was immediate and matter-of-fact. Negative. You're in violation of Terran space protection protocols. Stand down and prepare to be boarded or be destroyed. The Krillian commander's reply was a burst of plasma, fire directed at the nearest Terran cruiser. The energy beam struck the human ship's shields, causing them to flare and ripple, but the vessel remained undamaged. In response, every Terran ship in range opened fire simultaneously. Zethka watched in stunned silence as the space battle unfolded. The Terran weapons were unlike anything he had seen before. Instead of the bright energy beams favored by most species, they fired solid projectiles that moved at incredible speeds. The rounds punched through Krillian armor like it was made of paper, causing massive internal explosions. Kinetic weapons, Chen explained, noticing Zethka's confusion. Depleted uranium cores accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. Very effective against energy shields and armor. The Krillian fleet, which had seemed invincible moments before, was being systematically torn apart. Their return fire was largely ineffective against the Terran ship's thick armor and sophisticated point defense systems. For every shot that found its mark on a human vessel, dozens of Krillian ships were reduced to drifting wreckage. But it was not just the technology that disturbed Zethka. It was the cold efficiency of the human attack. There were no demands for surrender, no attempts at communication. The Terrans had identified the Krillians as enemies and were methodically destroying them with the same dispassion one might show when exterminating vermin. A Krillian destroyer broke from formation, its captain apparently deciding that discretion was the better part of valor. It jumped away, only to emerge from hyperspace directly into a Terran minefield that had been laid hours earlier. The explosion was visible even from the bridge of Zethka's flagship. Your people planned this entire engagement, Zethka realized. You knew the Krillians would come here. Chen nodded. We've been studying their expansion patterns. Veolonia Prime was the logical next target. Your people's peaceful nature and advanced terraforming technology make you valuable slaves. The Krillians always follow the same playbook. But how did you know to help us? We've barely made contact with your species. For the first time, Chen's expression softened slightly. Because we've been where you are now, Commander, facing extinction at the hands of a superior enemy force. The difference is we learned to fight back. On the tactical display, the Krillian fleet was down to fewer than 50 ships. Those that remained were trying to flee, but the Terran vessels pursued them with relentless efficiency. There would be no escape, no survivors to carry word of this defeat back to the Krillian Empire. Your soldiers, Zethka said quietly, they seem so ruthless. Chen was quiet for a moment before responding. The Krillians showed no mercy to the colonies they've conquered. Children, elders, civilians, it made no difference to them. My people learned long ago that sometimes mercy is a luxury you can't afford. Sometimes, the only way to protect the innocent is to be merciless to those who would harm them. As the last of the Krillian ships was reduced to scrap metal, Zethka felt a mixture of relief and unease. His people were safe, but he had witnessed something that challenged everything he believed about the nature of civilization. The humans had saved them, but the cold efficiency with which they had destroyed their enemies was deeply troubling. What happens now, he asked. Now, we talk, Chen replied. The Krillian Empire won't ignore the loss of an entire fleet. They'll come in greater numbers, with better preparation. Your people will need to decide whether they want to fight or continue running. We are not a warrior species, Zethka protested. We have no experience with warfare on this scale. Experience can be taught, Chun said grimly. The question is whether your people are willing to learn. Because I can promise you this, Commander, The Krillians won't stop until every free species in this galaxy is either dead or enslaved. And sometimes the only way to preserve peace is to become very good at war. The transmission ended, leaving Zethka alone with his thoughts as rescue ships began moving toward the few Krillian survivors floating in space. He watched as Terran Marines boarded the disabled vessels, taking prisoners with the same cold efficiency they had shown in battle. In the distance, Veolonia Prime continued its peaceful rotation, its billions of inhabitants unaware of how close they had come to slavery or death. They were safe now, but Zethka understood that their innocence had been lost forever. The universe had revealed itself to be a darker place than they had imagined, and survival would require them to become something they had never been before. The age of Veolonian peace was ending. The question now was what would replace it. As he stood on his bridge, surrounded by the debris of what had once been an unstoppable fleet, Commander Zethka began to understand that sometimes salvation came in forms you never expected. The humans had saved his people, but they had also shown him a truth about the universe that would haunt his dreams for years to come. In the vast darkness of space, mercy was often a weakness that the strong exploited to prey upon the innocent. And sometimes the only way to protect what you loved was to become something merciless yourself. The thought terrified him, but as he watched the Terran ships begin their methodical sweep of the battlefield, ensuring no Krillian would escape to threaten innocent worlds again, he began to wonder if perhaps terror was exactly what was needed. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had arrived, and for those who threatened the innocent, that knowledge would bring no comfort at all. 3 weeks after the Battle of Veolonia Prime, Colonel Marcus Chun stood in the sterile briefing room aboard the Terran battleship Retribution. Around the curved table sat representatives from 17 different species, all refugees from worlds the Krillian Empire had either conquered or threatened. The diversity was striking. Crystalline beings that communicated through light patterns, gaseous entities contained in environmental suits, and bipedal humanoids with features that defied classification. Chen had seen this room many times before, in many different configurations. The faces changed, but the story was always the same. Peaceful civilizations, caught unprepared by an enemy that viewed compassion as weakness and surrender as inevitable. The intelligence we've gathered from Krillian prisoners confirms our worst fears, Chen began, his voice carrying the weight of grim certainty. Emperor Vex then has declared a war of expansion. Every species that refuses to submit to Krillian rule will be eliminated. Every world that resists will be stripped of resources and abandoned. Ambassador Yileth of the Consortium of Free Worlds shifted nervously in her chair. Her species resembled giant butterflies, with iridescent wings that reflected her emotional state. Currently, they displayed deep purples and blues, colors that indicated fear and uncertainty. Surely the Galactic Council will intervene, she said, her voice translated through a complex harmonic interface. The Krillians cannot simply wage war against the entire galaxy. Chen's expression remained neutral, but those who knew him could detect the slight tightening around his eyes that indicated controlled anger. The Galactic Council issued a strongly worded condemnation and called for a peaceful resolution through dialogue. The Krillian response was to glass the Council's neutral meeting world and execute every diplomat on the planet. The room fell silent. The concept of deliberately targeting non-combatants was so foreign to most of these species that they struggled to comprehend it. Their civilizations had evolved beyond such barbarism millennia ago, or so they had believed. Dr. Kethmari, chief scientist of the Zentari Republic, leaned forward in her chair. Her people were one of the few species present who had actual military experience, though it was limited to defending against raiders and pirates. What you're describing is genocide on a galactic scale. Surely no species could be so uniformly evil. Evil is a philosophical concept, Chen replied. The Krillians see themselves as bringing order to a chaotic galaxy. They believe that peaceful species are weak genetic dead ends that serve no purpose except as resources to be harvested. From their perspective, they're improving the universe. He activated a holographic display showing recent Krillian conquests. World after world appeared in red, each representing billions of lives lost or enslaved. The progression was systematic, methodical, and unstoppable. The pattern is always the same, Chen continued. They target the most advanced, peaceful civilizations first, stripping them of technology and scientific knowledge. Then they move on to less developed worlds, taking what resources they need and eliminating the rest. In the past 5 years, they've conquered or destroyed over 200 star systems. Ambassador Telvan of the Ethereal Collective, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix, pulsed with soft orange light. Their species' equivalent of skepticism. If they're so powerful, how did your small fleet defeat them at Veolonia Prime? Chen's smile held no warmth. Because we understand something that most peaceful species don't. War isn't about having the biggest ships or the most advanced weapons. It's about being willing to do whatever is necessary to win. The Krillians are powerful, but they've grown complacent. They expect their enemies to fight by rules, to show mercy, to hesitate when difficult decisions must be made. And humans don't hesitate? Dr. Kethmari asked. No, Chen said simply. We don't. He gestured, and the holographic display changed to show the aftermath of the battle at Veolonia Prime. The debris field stretched for thousands of kilometers, the twisted remains of Krillian ships floating in perfect vacuum. But more disturbing to many in the room was the methodical way Terran vessels had hunted down escape pods, ensuring no survivors could report back to their commanders. You killed prisoners, Ambassador Yileth said, her wings now displaying shades of deep red, horror, and revulsion. We eliminated enemy combatants who would have returned to kill more innocents, Chen corrected. The Krillians don't take prisoners, and they don't show mercy to civilian populations. Every soldier we allowed to escape would have meant more dead children on the next world they attacked. The room erupted in uncomfortable murmurs. These species had spent millennia developing codes of conduct for warfare, rules that minimized casualties and protected noncombatants. The human approach violated every principle they held sacred. Commander Zethka, who had been silent since the meeting began, finally spoke. Colonel Chun, your people saved mine. I will not forget that death. But what you're describing, it sounds like you're asking us to become like the Krillians themselves. No, Chen said, his voice carrying a steel edge that made several representatives flinch. The Krillians kill for pleasure and profit. They enslave entire species for the crime of being weak. We kill soldiers who serve a genocidal empire, and we do it quickly and efficiently. There's a difference. Is there? Get my challenged. If you're willing to commit what we consider atrocities in the name of protecting the innocent, how are you different from those you fight? Chen was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of painful experience. Because at the end of the war, we go home. We don't enslave the defeated, we don't strip worlds bare of resources, and we don't commit genocide. We do what is necessary to protect the innocent, and then we stop. The Krillians will never stop until every free thought in the galaxy has been extinguished. He activated another display, this one showing a Terran colony world. Green fields stretched to the horizon, dotted with cities that gleamed like jewels in the sun. Children played in parks while their parents worked in laboratories and factories, advancing human knowledge and creating art that celebrated life. This is New Eden, Chun said. 2 years ago, it was home to 12 million colonists. Farmers, scientists, artists, teachers. People who had never hurt anyone in their lives. The Krillians found it 3 days before our fleet arrived. The display shifted, showing the same world reduced to a blackened wasteland. Cities lay in ruins, the atmosphere poisoned, the oceans boiling away into space. Nothing lived on the surface except the automated mining equipment the Krillians had left behind. They didn't just kill everyone, Chun continued, his voice deadly quiet. They torture them first, used them for experiments, forced families to watch as their children were dissected alive. all to break their spirits before putting them to work in the mines. The silence in the room was deafening. Several representatives looked physically ill, their species having evolved beyond such concepts of deliberate cruelty. We found evidence of what had happened in their computer records, Chen said. Video files, medical data, personal logs from the colonists. Do you know what the last entry said? A father watching his daughter die in agony, begging the universe for someone to come and stop the madness. Someone willing to show the Krillians the same mercy they had shown his family. He deactivated the display and looked around the room at the shocked faces of the assembled representatives. That's why we don't hesitate. That's why we don't show mercy to Krillian soldiers. Because every moment of hesitation means more new Edens. More children dying in agony while their parents pray for someone brave enough to do what must be done. Ambassador Telvan pulsed with deep blue light, their species' expression of profound sorrow. But surely there must be another way. Some method of stopping them without becoming monsters ourselves. If there is, we haven't found it, Chen admitted. We've tried negotiation. They responded by executing our diplomats. We've tried economic sanctions. They don't trade with species they intend to conquer. We've tried appealing to the Galactic Council, and you saw how that ended. Dr. Kethmari leaned back in her chair, her expression troubled. What exactly are you asking of us, Colonel? I'm offering you a choice, Chen replied. You can continue to run, to evacuate world after world as the Krillians advance, watching your civilizations slowly die as you lose the infrastructure needed to maintain your technology and culture. Or you can fight back. Fight back how? Commander Zethka asked. Our species have no experience with warfare on this scale. We don't know how to build weapons of mass destruction or train soldiers to kill without mercy. Then, you learn, Chen said bluntly. Terran military advisors will work with your fleets to upgrade your defensive capabilities. Our engineers will help you convert civilian infrastructure to military production. Our soldiers will teach your people how to fight. And in return, Ambassador Yileth asked suspiciously. In return, when this war is over, the galaxy doesn't belong to the Krillian Empire, Chen said. Your children grow up free, your cultures survive, and your species continue to evolve and explore the universe without fear. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some representatives argued for acceptance of the human offer, desperate to save their people by any means necessary. Others insisted that there had to be a better way, that becoming killers would corrupt their souls beyond redemption. Finally, Commander Zethka called for order. Colonel Chun, if we accept your offer, what guarantee do we have that humanity won't simply replace the Krillians as galactic tyrants? Your people have demonstrated a capacity for violence that frankly terrifies us. Chen's answer was immediate and unwavering. Because we've already had the power to conquer most of the species in this room, and we chose to offer partnership instead. Because our history shows that humans fight fiercely to protect freedom, but we don't seek to dominate others. And because when this war ends, our fleets will return to Terran space. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want to make sure it remains free. The vote, when it came, was not unanimous. 7 species agreed to accept human military assistance. 5 decided to continue their policy of evacuation and neutrality. 3 chose to attempt independent resistance, believing they could find a middle path between human brutality and Krillian genocide. 2 abstained entirely, 2 paralyzed by the moral implications to choose any course of action. As the meeting broke up, Chen found himself alone with Commander Zethka. The Vailonian looked exhausted, the weight of his decision clearly taking a toll on his peaceful nature. I hope we're making the right choice, Zethka said quietly. So do I, Chen admitted. But I can promise you this, whatever we become in this war will still be better than what the Krillians would have made you. They would have broken your spirits and turned you into slaves. We're going to teach you to fight back. The choice of who you become afterward will still be yours. As Chun left the briefing room, he carried with him the knowledge that the galaxy was about to change in ways that would echo through history. The age of peaceful exploration and diplomatic solutions was ending. What would replace it remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. The Krillian Empire had awakened something in humanity that they would come to regret. And now, that same merciless determination was spreading to other species that had thought themselves too civilized for war. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes civilization's greatest strength was not its capacity for peace, but its willingness to abandon peace to protect what mattered most. The real war was just beginning. Captain Sarah Mitchell stood on the observation deck of the Valonian orbital shipyard, watching as the first hybrid warships took shape in the construction bays below. 6 months of intensive cooperation had produced vessels that combined the best of both technologies. Valonian energy manipulation systems merged with human armor and weapons design. The result was unlike anything either species had built before. The ships were larger than standard human cruisers, but more compact than typical Valonian exploration vessels. Their hulls bore the angular, predatory lines that characterized Terran military design, but they pulsed with the soft bioluminescent patterns that Valonian crews used for identification and communication. Most importantly, they bristled with the hybrid weapon systems that had proven devastatingly effective in recent skirmishes with Krillian advanced scouts. The conversion rate exceeds all projections, reported Chief Engineer Telmore, his 4 arms moving in the complex gesture patterns that indicated satisfaction among his people. Our manufacturing capabilities have increased by 300% since implementing Terran mass production techniques. Mitchell nodded, but her expression remained troubled. The technical integration had been remarkably successful, but the cultural changes required had been more difficult than anyone had anticipated. The Valonians were adapting to warfare with disturbing efficiency. "What about the crew training programs?" she asked. "Proceeding as scheduled," Telmore replied. "Though I must admit, the psychological conditioning requirements continue to concern many of our people. Some are calling it dehumanization, if you'll pardon the expression." Mitchell understood his concern. Teaching peaceful species to kill efficiently required more than just weapons training. It meant breaking down millennia of evolutionary conditioning that favored cooperation over conflict. Human military psychologists had developed techniques to help allied species overcome their natural reluctance to take life, but the process was necessarily brutal. "Any word from the Zentari front?" Mitchell asked. Telmore's bioluminescent patches dimmed to a worried amber. "The last transmission was received 48 hours ago. General Morrison reported successful engagement with a Krillian battle group, but communication has been irregular since then." The Zentari Republic had been one of the first to fully embrace human military doctrine, and their natural aggression had made them ideal candidates for advanced tactical training. But that same aggressiveness had led them to volunteer for increasingly dangerous missions against Krillian forces. A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. The main display activated, revealing the scarred face of General David Morrison. The veteran soldier looked exhausted, his uniform torn and stained with what appeared to be alien blood. Behind him, Mitchell could see the bridge of his command ship, sparks flying from damaged consoles while crew members worked frantically at their stations. "Captain Mitchell." Morrison's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "We've got a situation here that requires immediate escalation to command authority." "Report, General," Mitchell replied, already dreading what she was about to hear. 3 days ago, my task force intercepted Krillian intelligence indicating a major offensive against the Ethereal Collective's home system. We moved to intercept, engaging a Krillian fleet of approximately 60 vessels. Mitchell frowned. Morrison's force consisted of only 20 ships, a mix of human cruisers and Zentari heavy destroyers. Even with their technological advantages, those odds should have been impossible. The initial engagement went according to plan. Morrison continued. "We used the new quantum mines to break up their formation, then hit them with coordinated kinetic strikes. Destroyed about half their force in the first 20 minutes. "That sounds like a success," Mitchell said carefully. Morrison's expression darkened. "It was until we discovered what they were really carrying. The ships we destroyed weren't just warships, Captain. They were transports. full of prisoners from a dozen different species. The implications hit Mitchell like a physical blow. How many? Conservative estimates suggest over 2 million civilians, Morrison said, his voice hollow. Families, children, elderly. All of them died when we destroyed those ships. Telmore made a sound of distress, his bioluminescent patterns flickering in patterns that indicated horror and grief. The Veolonians, despite their ongoing military training, still possessed the deep emotional connections to life that made such casualties almost unbearable to contemplate. General, you had no way of knowing, Mitchell began. That's not the worst part, Morrison interrupted. We captured several Krillian officers alive. Under interrogation, they revealed this was deliberate. They've started using civilian shields specifically because they know it'll make us hesitate. They're counting on our reluctance to kill innocents. Mitchell felt a cold anger building in her chest. The Krillians had found humanity's weakness. The same moral constraints that separated human soldiers from mindless killers could be exploited by an enemy with no such limitations. What's the status of the ethereal collective system? She asked. The Krillians pulled back after we destroyed their escort fleet, but intelligence suggests they're massing for another assault, this time with even more civilian shields. Morrison paused, his expression grim. Captain, we need new protocols. The current rules of engagement don't account for this level of calculated barbarism. Before Mitchell could respond, another voice cut into the transmission. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the chief military psychologist for the Human Expeditionary Force, appeared on a secondary screen. Her usually composed demeanor showed signs of strain. Captain Mitchell, I've been monitoring the situation along with similar incidents across all fronts. The Krillians have systematically begun incorporating civilian populations into their military operations. They're using our moral constraints as weapons against us. What are you recommending, Doctor? Mitchell asked, though she already suspected the answer would be one she didn't want to hear. We need to update our psychological conditioning protocols for all allied species, Dr. Vasquez said bluntly. Current training focuses on overcoming reluctance to kill enemy combatants. But if the enemy is using civilians as human shields, our soldiers need to be prepared to accept massive collateral damage in service of larger strategic objectives. Telmore's patterns shifted to deep purple, shock, and revulsion. Doctor, what you're describing is the deliberate killing of innocents. How does that make us different from the Krillians? Because we don't target civilians deliberately, Dr. Vasquez replied. But if we allow the enemy to gain strategic advantage by using innocent lives as shields, more people will ultimately die. Sometimes the most moral choice is the one that causes immediate harm to prevent greater future suffering. The philosophical debate that followed was one that had raged in human military colleges for centuries. Where was the line between necessary brutality and unforgivable atrocity? How many innocent lives could be sacrificed to save a greater number of innocent lives? For species like the Veolonians, these questions were not abstract philosophical exercises. They cut to the core of everything their civilizations had built over millennia of peaceful development. There has to be another way, Telmore insisted. Some technology or tactic that would allow us to disable the transport ships without killing the prisoners. General Morrison's laugh was bitter. We tried that at the Kepler Station engagement. Spent precious minutes attempting precision strikes to disable Krillian transports without harming the civilian compartments. While we were being careful, they flanked us and destroyed 3 Allied cruisers. 5,000 of our own people died because we hesitated to kill their prisoners. So what's the alternative? Mitchell asked. We become mass murderers to stop mass murderers. No, Morrison replied firmly. We become soldiers who understand that war is hell, and sometimes you have to walk through hell to reach the other side. The Krillians are counting on our moral constraints to paralyze us. Every time we hesitate, every time we let mercy override tactical necessity, more worlds fall to their empire. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward, her expression intense. Captain, I've been studying Krillian psychology through interrogation of prisoners. They genuinely believe that compassion is an evolutionary weakness that makes species unfit for survival. Every act of mercy we show reinforces their conviction that they can defeat us by exploiting our humanity. Then, what do you propose? Mitchell asked. Total warfare protocols, Dr. Vasquez said. We remove the distinction between military and civilian targets when dealing with Krillian forces. Any ship, station, or installation under Krillian control becomes a legitimate military target regardless of who might be aboard. The silence that followed was deafening. Telmor's bioluminescent patterns had shifted to complete darkness, the Veilonian equivalent of being too horrified to process information normally. Doctor, Mitchell said carefully, what you're describing is genocide. What the Krillians are doing is genocide, Dr. Vasquez corrected. What I'm proposing is the only strategy that gives the galaxy's free species a chance of survival. The Krillians have made it clear that they will use every civilian population as a weapon against us. If we continue to allow tactical limitations based on the presence of prisoners, we will lose this war. General Morrison's image flickered as another explosion rocked his ship. Captain, I need an answer. My fleet is holding position outside the ethereal collective system, but Krillian reinforcements are gathering. If we're going to move, it has to be now. Mitchell closed her eyes, feeling the weight of billions of lives hanging on her decision. She thought of New Eden, of the children who had died in agony while their parents prayed for someone brave enough to do what was necessary. She thought of the Krillian officers who had laughed when describing how they planned to use civilian shields to paralyze their enemies. When she opened her eyes, her expression had changed. The uncertainty was gone, replaced by the cold determination that had made humanity feared across the galaxy. General Morrison, you are authorized to engage Krillian forces using any means necessary to achieve victory. Civilian casualties are regrettable, but acceptable if they serve larger strategic objectives. Telmor made a sound of anguish. Captain, you cannot be serious. You're talking about murdering innocent people. I'm talking about ending a war, Mitchell replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. The Krillians want to turn our compassion into a weakness. They want us to hesitate while they conquer world after world. I won't let that happen. She turned to Dr. Vasquez. Doctor, implement the new protocols immediately. All allied species need to understand that the rules of engagement have changed. We're not fighting a civilized enemy who will honor the conventions of war. We're fighting an empire that sees mercy as vulnerability. Understood, Captain, Dr. Vasquez replied. I'll begin updated psychological conditioning for all allied forces immediately. As the transmission ended, Mitchell found herself alone with Telmor. The Veilonian engineer sat in silence, his patterns dark and still. Chief, she said quietly, I know this is difficult, but you have to understand. If we don't win this war, your entire species will be enslaved or extinct within a generation. I understand the logic, Telmor replied, his voice barely audible through the translator. What terrifies me is how easily I'm beginning to accept it. 6 months ago, the idea of deliberately killing civilians would have been unthinkable. Now I find myself calculating acceptable casualty ratios and wondering if that makes me a monster. Mitchell placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture that would have been meaningful to both their species. The fact that you're still asking that question means you're not a monster, Chief. Monsters don't worry about the morality of their actions. But what happens when we stop asking the question? Telmor asked. What happens when calculating the deaths of innocents becomes routine? What will we have become by the time this war ends? It was a question Mitchell couldn't answer. She could only hope that when the Krillian Empire finally fell, there would still be enough of their original humanity left to rebuild something worth saving. The war was changing them all, and there would be no going back to the innocent civilizations they had been before. The only choice now was to become something capable of winning, regardless of the cost to their souls. In the construction bays below, the hybrid warships continued to take shape, bristling with weapons designed to kill without discrimination or mercy. They were beautiful in their deadly efficiency, and that beauty was perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. Admiral Elena Kowalski stood in the war room of the human dreadnought Prometheus, surrounded by holographic displays showing the current state of the galactic conflict. 18 months had passed since the implementation of total warfare protocols, and the results were both encouraging and deeply disturbing. The Allied forces had stopped retreating. Krillian expansion had been halted on 3 separate fronts. But the cost had been measured in billions of lives, many of them innocent civilians caught in the crossfire of a conflict that no longer recognized the concept of noncombatants. Final casualty reports from the Kepler offensive, reported Commander Zhang, her voice carefully neutral despite the staggering numbers she was about to read. Krillian military losses, approximately 400,000. Civilian casualties, 2.7 million. Allied losses, 63,000. The numbers hung in the air like an accusation. In the old days, before the protocols changed, losing nearly 3 million civilians to destroy a Krillian battle fleet would have been considered an unmitigated disaster. Now it was being classified as a strategic victory. Admiral Kowalski studied the faces around the table. The command staff included representatives from 7 different species, all of them bearing the psychological scars of a war that had forced them to abandon everything they once believed about the value of individual life. Commander Yethlak of the Zentari Republic showed none of his species' former enthusiasm for battle. His warrior culture had always celebrated combat, but even they had possessed concepts of honor and protecting the innocent. Dr. Sentai of the ethereal collective flickered with dim, gray light patterns that indicated deep spiritual exhaustion. Her people's pure energy forms had made them ideal for intelligence gathering, but witnessing the systematic destruction of civilian populations had begun to drive many of them to what could only be described as madness. Status report on the Veilonian integration program, Kowalski requested. Colonel Chun, now serving as liaison between human forces and allied species, accessed his datapad. The young officer who had once saved Velonia Prime looked older now, his face marked by the weight of decisions that would have been unthinkable in peacetime. Veilonian forces have successfully completed advanced psychological conditioning, he reported. Initial resistance to civilian casualties has decreased by 87%. Their ship crews now demonstrate acceptable efficiency in total warfare scenarios. Acceptable efficiency, Commander Tealmore repeated quietly. The Veilonian engineer had requested transfer to the front lines 6 months earlier, claiming that if his people were going to become killers, he wanted to understand what they were becoming. The bioluminescent patterns on his skin had changed permanently, displaying the muted grays and browns that indicated profound psychological trauma. Chief Telmore, do you have something to add? Admiral Kowalski asked. Just an observation, Admiral, Telmore replied. When my people first made contact with humanity, we were impressed by your technological capabilities and your willingness to help defend our world. We thought we understood what human soldiers were like. We thought you were simply warriors who happened to be effective at protecting others. He paused, his patterns shifting to the deep blues that indicated sadness. We didn't understand that you weren't born warriors. You were a peaceful species, just like us, who learned to become killers because the universe forced that choice upon you. And now we're learning the same lesson. Admiral Kowalski felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. The decision to implement total warfare protocols had saved dozens of worlds from Krillian conquest, but it had also fundamentally changed every species involved in the conflict. The innocent civilizations that had sought humanity's help were being transformed into something their ancestors would not recognize. Admiral, interrupted Lieutenant Santos at the communications station, we're receiving an urgent transmission from the outer perimeter. It's Admiral Vexthen himself. The room fell silent. Emperor Vexthen's son and military commander had never communicated directly with Allied forces before. Krillian policy was to offer only demands for surrender, never negotiation. Put it through, Kowalski ordered. The holographic display shimmered, revealing a figure that embodied everything the Allied species had come to fear about their enemies. Admiral Vex then stood nearly 3 meters tall, his chitinous exoskeleton scarred from countless battles. Multiple arms ended in razor-sharp claws that could tear through most forms of armor, and his compound eyes reflected no emotion that any human or allied species could recognize. Admiral Kowalski. The Krillian's voice was translated through a complex algorithm that attempted to render his alien speech patterns into comprehensible words. I request immediate cessation of hostilities for the purpose of formal negotiation. The request was so unexpected that several officers exchanged confused glances. Krillians didn't negotiate. They conquered or they died trying. Admiral Vexton, Kowalski replied carefully, "The Allied forces are prepared to discuss terms for your unconditional surrender." The Krillian's mandibles clicked in what the translation matrix identified as amusement. "You misunderstand the situation, Admiral. I'm not requesting surrender. I'm offering you the opportunity to prevent the total annihilation of your alliance." "Explain," Kowalski said curtly. "Your species and their allies have proven to be unexpectedly adaptable," Vex then admitted. "When we first encountered human resistance, we assumed you were simply another warrior culture that had developed advanced weapons. We expected to defeat you through superior numbers and tactical expertise." The Krillian's image shifted as he gestured with multiple arms towards something off-screen. "We did not anticipate that you would abandon your moral constraints so completely. The efficiency with which you now eliminate civilian populations exceeds even our own strategic calculations." Commander Zhang leaned forward. "Are you saying you're afraid of us?" "Fear is not a concept that translates well between our species," Vex then replied. "But we have observed that your total warfare doctrine has made you more effective killers than we are. More importantly, you have successfully trained other species to adopt similar methods." Admiral Kowalski studied the alien commander, searching for any sign of deception or tactical misdirection. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Partition," Vex then said simply. "The galaxy is vast enough for multiple empires. We propose dividing the known systems between Krillian and allied territories. Each faction maintains control over their current holdings and agrees to avoid expansion into the other sphere of influence." The silence that followed was profound. After nearly 2 years of total warfare, the possibility of peace seemed almost incomprehensible. Dr. Sentai's energy form pulsed with sudden brightness. "You're serious. You're actually offering to end the war." "The war as currently conducted serves neither of our interests," Vex then explained. "Your alliance has demonstrated that peaceful species can be converted into effective killing machines when properly motivated. Continuing this conflict will result in mutual destruction on a scale that even the Krillian Empire considers counterproductive." Colonel Chen's expression was skeptical. "Why should we believe you'll honor any agreement? Your species has broken every treaty and promise you've made to other civilizations." "Because the alternative is mutual annihilation," Vex then replied bluntly. "Your alliance has developed weapons and tactics that we cannot effectively counter without accepting casualty rates that would cripple the Empire. Similarly, we possess the capability to eliminate your core worlds before your fleets could respond. Continued warfare guarantees the destruction of both our civilizations." Admiral Kowalski found herself facing a decision that would determine the fate of trillions of beings across the galaxy. Accept the partition and allow the Krillian Empire to continue enslaving the species within their territory, or continue the war and risk total destruction for both sides. "Admiral," Commander Telmore said quietly, "perhaps we should consider what the civilian populations under current Krillian control would want." "We know what they would want," Colonel Chan replied grimly. "Freedom. But wanting something and having a realistic chance of achieving it are different things." Dr. Sentai flickered with patterns that indicated deep thought. "If we accept partition, we condemn billions of people to continued slavery. If we continue fighting, we risk destroying both civilizations entirely." "There's another consideration," Commander Zhang added. "What happens to the allied species if this war ends? We've trained entire civilizations to become killers. Do they just go back to being peaceful farmers and scientists? It was a question that had haunted Admiral Kowalski for months. The psychological conditioning required to turn peaceful species into effective soldiers wasn't easily reversed. The Vailonians, Zentauri, and other allied races have been fundamentally changed by their participation in total warfare. Even if the shooting stopped tomorrow, the galaxy would never return to its previous state of innocent exploration and cooperation. Admiral Vexton, Kowalski said finally, assuming we were interested in discussing partition, what guarantees could you provide that the Krillian Empire would honor the boundaries? The same guarantee you could provide about human expansion, Vexton replied. Mutuelle assure de destruction. Both of our civilizations now possess the capability to eliminate the other. This creates a stability that did not exist when the conflict began. Admiral Kowalski realized that she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Two civilizations that had developed the capacity to destroy each other completely, forced to choose between coexistence and mutual annihilation. I'll need to consult with the Allied Council, she said finally. Of course, Vexton replied. But I should inform you that our intelligence indicates significant internal resistance within your alliance to continued warfare. Many of your member species are questioning whether victory is worth the cost in civilian casualties. The transmission ended, leaving the command staff alone with the weight of an impossible decision. Continue fighting until one civilization completely destroyed the other, or accept a partition that would leave billions enslaved but might prevent total galactic annihilation. What do we tell the Council? Colonel Chin asked. The truth, Admiral Kowalski replied. That we've become so effective at killing that our enemies are afraid to continue fighting us. And that maybe, just maybe, that's the most terrifying victory of all. As the senior officers filed out to prepare their reports, Admiral Kowalski remained alone in the war room, surrounded by displays showing a galaxy torn apart by conflict. The innocent civilizations that had sought humanity's protection had gotten exactly what they asked for, victory over their enemies. But the price had been their innocence itself. The question now was whether that price had been worth paying, and what kind of galaxy would emerge from the ashes of the old one. The Krillians were offering peace, but it would be a peace built on the foundation of mutual terror rather than mutual understanding. Perhaps that was the only kind of peace the galaxy deserved now. In the distance, through the viewing ports of the command center, Admiral Kowalski could see the lights of the Allied fleet stretching into infinity. Each ship represented a species that had abandoned its fundamental nature to survive in a hostile universe. They had learned to become killers to preserve their freedom. The irony was not lost on her that their greatest victory might have cost them everything they had originally fought to protect.